Hello everyone, I hope everybody is doing well. So I decided to start A-level study series. So we'll begin with chapter 1. And in chapter 1, the initial concept that you're introduced with or that you need to understand before obviously digging deeper down into other concepts is the idea of society. Now, before I obviously explain to you the idea of society, we need to understand it from a scholarly perspective. So there's a scholar called Benedict Anderson, and he describes societies as imagined communities. And these are communities that only exist in our mind. So he points out that the members of even the smallest nation will never know most of their fellow members, meet them, or even hear of them. Yet, in the minds of each lives the image of other person. So for example, the society that you live in is actually something that's imagined in your own mind. For example, people living in one particular society share same language, they may share same customs, same religion, same cuisine, right? So it's something that exists only in our mind. So for example, it's obviously nearly impossible that you've met everybody in your society. So just like Benedict Anderson points out that most of your fellow members will never know that you've met them or you even have heard of them, but yet you know that we all belong to the same society. Now coming on to the further explanation of society. Societies consist of like a physical space and also mental space. Now physical space idea is a really simple one, something tangible. For example, something that you can touch. Your societies are obviously demarcated or they're separated by geographical borders, right? For example, I live in the Pakistani society or I live in the Bangladeshi society or the Indian society. There are obviously territories that have been marked that over here the Pakistani society is going to end, people especially living in Pakistan. What's like a mental space? Mental space is something that only exists in your own mind. It's something that it's like a space that you construct on your own, and it's based on like intangible things like language, like your custom, like your religion, based on your beliefs, right? So society is basically, it's something that's imagined, the key idea, and it consists of a physical space and also a mental space. Okay, now moving on to the definition of culture. Now culture, the basic definition of culture is that culture is a way of life, and it's something, culture is always something that's learned and that's taught through primary and secondary socialization. What's actually socialization? Socialization is the process whereby an individual becomes a competent member of the society. And we can develop this concept by understanding the idea that cultures contribute to the social construction of reality. Now, you all might not understand what's this idea of social construction of reality. It's the idea that there's obviously a reality that you construct on your own. For example, there are languages that we have obviously built up. There are customs that we have been introduced to. There are traditions, there are cuisines, right? So the reality that we have constructed, it's something based, the reality that we have constructed based on our cultural practices is something that we have made on our own, right? Just take an example of color, which is white. Now, white is something that is obviously not neutral for every culture. If you obviously go to like a Christian wedding, they wear white over there because it symbolizes happiness and happiness for them, right? Simply. But if you go to like an Indian funeral, so they prefer to wear white at funerals and red at their weddings. So you see, there's a complete opposite, and how cultures are like dynamic and they're changing, and you obviously construct and reconstruct and you define and redefine the cultural meanings. Obviously you associate different cultural meanings with different things, right? And with obviously, just like I gave you the example with different colors. Okay, now moving on to the idea of roles. This is a really simple definition. So every role, there are two things that are obviously important whenever you consider the idea of role. Every role has a name or a label, and every role, whenever you play any kind of role, it can only be performed in relation to another one. So role can never be performed independently. For example, I can only be a teacher if I have students to teach, right? So nobody can call me a teacher. I cannot call myself a teacher independently if I do not have anybody to teach. A mother can never be a mother if there is no child for her to take care of, right? So a role always has a name or a label, like a teacher or a mother, and a role is always performed in relation to the other role. For example, a teacher's role is always performed in relation to the role of a student, and a mother's role is always performed in relation to a role of a child, or a doctor's role is always being performed in relation to the role of a patient. Okay, moving on to our next definition, which is of values. So all roles have a prescribed aspect based on beliefs on how people should behave, right? Every role. So teacher should know that they have to obviously be on time, they have to be attentive in class, they have to plan the lectures. A mother obviously has to be more caring and she has other duties. So playing a role is guided or governed by values that provide general guidelines. For example, a teacher should teach their students, a parent should take care of the child, and so on. So values are generally something that provide like a broad guideline for any kind of role that you play in the society, right? A simple thing. Whenever you want to understand the idea of values, just remember the values provide general guidelines. They're simply guidelines. Okay, moving on to another definition, which is of norms. So what are norms? Norms are basically specific rules that show people how people should act in a particular situation. For example, when you have to pay your electricity bills, you have to wait for your turn and you have to stand in a queue, right? You have to wait for your turn to obviously take service from anybody. So it's like a norm, it's like a general rule you have to follow. And why do you have to follow rules? It's because, why do you have to follow norms, or why do you have to follow rules? It's because according to Merton, without order and without predictability, behavior becomes risky and confusing, and it's going to lead to a state of what? Normlessness or anomie. So anomie is the idea of normlessness, where obviously there's going to be chaos, there's going to be disorder, there's going to be disruption, and obviously there's going to be more confusion and anger and fear. For example, if children are not attending the school on time, and the classes on time, not on time, and they're bunking the classes, and teachers are also not on time, then the school is not going to work and the norms are not being followed in a school setting. So you see, this is going to lead to what? A state of normlessness, and obviously to a state of like chaos and disruption, where nobody is achieving their goals at the end of the day. So where you see that, I know a lot of students get confused between the idea of values and norms. So values are simply general guidelines for each kind of role that you perform, and norms are simply the rules that you have to follow in the society. So they're like general rules in the society, that you have to obviously drive your car when the signal turns at green, you have to be punctual to school, you have to follow like a line or queue and wait for your turn. Those are like simple rules that you have to follow in order to bring order and predictability in your society. Okay, the last thing that we're left with, and the last definition, is the idea of beliefs. This is a really simple definition. So what are beliefs? Beliefs are simply important and they're deep-rooted ideas that shape our values, obviously, and are in some respects shaped by them. So for example, I'll give you a simple example. For example, people may believe in different ideas, like you may believe in the idea of democracy or dictatorship or feminism or socialism or liberalism, any kind of. So beliefs are what? Beliefs are something that you believe in. It's something that you hold dear to yourself, and something that you want to abide by. For example, you believe in the idea of gender equality, so you're obviously going to take steps for that, right? Okay, this brings me to the end of this part 1. I hope you like this video, and I hope that you like the way that I'm explaining. If you like this video, then obviously give a thumbs up, and obviously comment down below for the part 2, and I'll be obviously waiting for your response, and then I'll be posting part 2 soon if I get like a very good positive response. Thank you for watching.